All right, Kevin, welcome to the great outdoors and the campfire sessions.
Thank you for having me, my friend. I wish I was outdoors with you. I love the backdrop. I love the studio, for lack of better phrasing, and I'm excited to be here, my friend.
I think it's all about making that like safe and comfortable space though that makes podcasting really work.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard virtually. It can be hard virtually, but you and I have known each other for 2 minutes,
Yeah, about that.
and I feel like I've known you for years and years and years, and I think that's a skill. That's a skill that you have. So I'll mirror that to you.
I appreciate that. I think that's the biggest reason I do these things outside and around the fire and everything because it does bring something very special
Yeah.
out of not only the guest but the connection.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm sure you get a lot of different exclamations when people log on and see you out in the wilderness.
I get a lot of different reactions, all the way from that is really cool to what am I supposed to do? Stare at the fire?
Well, that's the beauty of it. You can do whatever you want.
Exactly. And I think that's one thing that podcasting has really taught me about life, is you can shape it, you can mold it to anything you want it to be.
Yeah, there's something about being on camera, being on a microphone, and then figuring out who you really are. There's something about the authenticity. If you want to be the most authentic version of yourself, I think being on stuff like this helps you figure out who that actually is.
Absolutely. I think it's really interesting. A lot of people, when they find out about the show, they're like, oh my God, you got a podcast. It's really cool. And I'm like, yeah, it's fun, it's cool. It's a unique, different version of journaling.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to come to me saying, I'm trying to figure out who I am, and it's so cool that you've got this backlog of all these episodes of your show helping you to look back and define that. It's something that all of us can do, whether we get in front of a camera or we just simply pick up a piece of paper. We're able to create that backlog and look back and realize that the things that we struggle with, they're they're things we had to deal with for a reason.
You said this before we jumped on and started recording. You said you and I are similar. We've had similarities in life and we resonate with each other. Very interestingly, I often say that. I say when people will say, "What do you do when you're struggling?" And I say whether I'm doing really well, like over the moon, or I just feel like I am dragging, I go back and look at old content because I am privileged to have 1,800 episodes where I can go back and say, where was I 6 years ago? Oh, yeah, I remember that episode. Oh, yeah, yeah, I remember that breakup. I remember what that was like. I think that's one of the most valuable things. And I second the fact that I always suggest you take out your cell phone. If you don't have a podcast, if you don't have a blog, if you're not journaling, take out your cell phone. Say, today is October 15th, and this is what I'm going through. And then you go look at that thing a month from today and see how much has changed, see how much has stayed the same. I think that is one of the best practices in the world. So I couldn't agree with that enough.
And I think that sets the stage actually for a question that comes to mind is what's your opinion about adversity? Is that something that makes the person, or is it something that we can just kind of set aside and skim through life and still find who we're supposed to be?
You starting with a heavy one. I I used to think so when we first started having guests on. I would say to myself, "What an incredible story of overcoming adversity. We'll probably never hear anything like that again." And then next week we'd have a guest and they'd have their own unique version of overcoming adversity and then that becoming their purpose and their mission and their passion in life. So I believe your adversity can become your advantage if you know how to make it that way. I can't tell you how. I don't know how to make it so. I don't think you can ever really outrun it because your past is always connected to you and you can't really, I mean, you can let it go, but it's always there. I think a lot of adversity creates necessity. I think a lot of adversity creates perspective. I think adversity can create character. So I think it's one of the things that we're all going to experience in some way, shape, or form. It's what you do with it that really matters. I don't know if you can just pretend it didn't happen. I think it shapes you. I wouldn't be the man I am without the adversity that I've experienced, but I was lucky enough or privileged enough or stubborn enough maybe to use my adversity to make a real advantage, but not everybody has that. So I don't know where that disconnection is.
It's kind of a slippery slope, really, I think,
Mm.
because, a lot of us, especially a lot of people that come to me, the first couple miles that we'll set out on a trail, it sparks a lot of their past, a lot of things that they've been hiding from. And I know, especially this time of year with it being deer season, I look back at this a lot and I think about the connection that I used to have with the wilderness. I would simply look to go out, get things done, and get back as quick as I could because I didn't want to sit with my phone. I was always afraid of what would come up from the past, and it always draws me back to the line from Meditations where Marcus Aurelius is talking about all these negative things that are happening, and he almost wants to stop and say "poor me," but then the very next line he goes, "It's really good these things have happened because only I can learn from them, only I can deal with them, and so on and so forth in my unique way
Mm.
that's going to benefit who I am." And as I take people out on the trail and all these different things come up, it's amazing to see that transition from fear of the past to accepting that the past helped write who I am right here, right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So much, I think so much of it is perspective. Mindset, you hear that term thrown around a lot. Mindset. What's this person's mindset? They have a very strong mindset. But that really is the through line. If you have a mindset of everything that happened to me is why I am the person I am today, and it's the reason I am where I am today, and I don't like where I am, probably not going to like your past very much. But if your mindset is, yeah, I had some stuff and I went through some stuff, but I'm better because of it. I respect and have gratitude for where I am because of it. And I learned invaluable lessons that I would never know if I didn't go through that. You're probably going to have a pretty positive outlook on your past. So I think the mindset component of it is big too, because what you think you are is just as, if not more important than what you actually are. And if you look back and you blame everything on your past, even if it's not your past fault, you're going to think it is. And if you think everything that happened in the past is the reason you're successful, that's going to be your belief system and you're going to operate that way. So, yeah, it's a very philosophical place to be.
It is. I think it actually, in a roundabout way, kind of ties into that victim mentality.
Mm-hmm.
We look at so much of what we do based off of where we've been and what we've experienced. But I think, it's still something we can channel, whether it's positive or negative, into a positive if we're willing to step outside of ourselves right now
Yeah.
and just look at the natural flow of things. I mean, think about some of our founding fathers here. Daniel Boone, first one that comes to mind. A lot of what I perceive his motivations to continue to move and move and move almost kind of fits into today's context of social anxiety and our willingness to disconnect and break away from people just to be alone.
Mm.
But then also you got Davy Crockett. There's so many parallels within the adversities that they both faced. One kind of built his way without even thinking about it. The other took what people projected on him and made it who he was. And if you stop and you think about your plan in life and where you want to go, you can use all these different aspects of the environment around you.
Yeah, I think the hard thing is it's easy to lose necessity. Back in the day, in the earlier days, there was a lot more necessity because if you didn't make a way, there was going to be no way. Why did you start this, Mike? What was the necessity under? Because you and I had a little preamble, and you were mentioning that there's been a lot of growth in this for you. What was the necessity? There had to be a pretty large piece of necessity to start this mission.
So actually the biggest underlining theme of why I started doing this was to document my journey of dealing with extreme depression, extreme anxiety, post suicide attempt.
Mm.
And the way that it ended up coming together, obviously, I done a lot of my work, personal work out in the outdoors, but I had hooked up with the Surbid Nation and got my first hunting sponsorship. Part of that was I had to have a social media presence, and I wanted to use it in a way that was extremely different than the way everybody else was using it. Because everybody else had their how to's or check out this great hunt, but nobody in the community addressed mental health.
Mm.
And when I stop and think about the downward spiral that led me to the blind to attempt to take my life that night, had somebody been there to maybe tap me on the shoulder and just remind me that it was going to be okay, none of that probably would have happened. So I wanted to develop that voice. And that voice ended up transitioning from just the outdoor community to now everybody around the world about it. And it's really cool the way that the transition has happened.
It's I think there's the lesson of necessity in there. I I think it's really hard to wake up one day and just decide, you know what, I'm going to change everything about my life. Unless you have some reminder of mortality. And a lot of people have said that. Like, do you need, why does pain work so well for change? Because it's a reminder that what we're doing isn't working. It's just a reminder. It's a perspective. It's a, oh, hey, just so you know, what you're doing isn't working. And we've ended up where we've ended up based on what we've done. We gotta to pivot some stuff around. Same for me. My goal is to be the person I needed when I was suicidal. That's, but if I never had that rock bottom basement moment, I'd probably be existing just kind of somewhere in between. There wouldn't be a lot of necessity. I wouldn't be getting better because there'd be no reason to. Necessity is a painful, maybe a painful requirement for change.
I can distinctly remember sitting in my truck looking in the rear view mirror one night, going, none of these patterns that I've done have progressed me anywhere. I always end up back where I'm at. And that was probably that painful night of transition, that night where you realize you got to take something else on. You got to try some different things.
Mm.
And, I attribute a lot of that to the time that I'd spend on the trail. And especially, going out with the least amount of gear that I can go with and having to start crafting things, building shelter, finding things, materials for fires, sterilizing water, things like that. It rewrote the stimulus for that suicide attempt,
Mm.
that I had no worth and I had no value. So I'd go out and I would physically show myself that I had worth, I had value, I had the ability to do these things within a space that's free, that's safe. And then I'd come into the turmoil of, the concrete world. And I'd start to feel that change and that transition. And that led to a long road of solitude and self-discovery. But coming out of it now, coming out of the woods per se, it's changed the palette and it's changed the color of the world around me, which is something that I'm extremely grateful for.
Do you feel alone when you're in nature?
No,
What do you feel?
I feel a connectivity. I feel support. I feel the sense of adventure, which is something that depression really strips from you, regardless of what context of the world you're standing in.
Mm.
And more importantly, I feel the ability to grow.
Yeah.
It's that growth. You know, we all have hobbies, we all have things that we do that we feel safe within. And that's the irony of a lot of this project is it's based around meditation within the outdoor community, within an outdoor environment. And the very first time that meditation was brought up to me, I argued and I fought for an hour. I was like, that is not me. And then lo and behold, I go around back and I pick up my bow for my nightly practice. And it dawned on me. I'm like, there's breath work, there's slowing of your thoughts, there's grounding and centering. And I love telling that story and sharing that because we all do that every day.
Hmm.
Every day we get time to interact with our hobby. We are doing the simple art and the acts of meditation.
I'll never forget the first time I did breath work. I was thinking, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? And then by the end of it, I was bawling my eyes out, and I was saying the same. I was like, "What is happening here? What is going on?" And that went to be that ended up becoming one of my favorite things to do. And one of the memories, so we used to have a podcast studio that we would record at. And one of my fondest memories of that podcast studio, it was me, my business partner, and one of our friends. And we did a group breathing exercise, breath work. And by the end of it, we were all bawling our eyes out. And it was one of the most humbling experiences ever because there's three vulnerable men in this room just going through their own experience with nothing but themselves, some gentle music, and breathing. And it was one of the wildest. It was incredible. And I probably don't do it as much as I should. It's been a minute since I've done it, so I'm going to use this as a reminder to do it with my conversation with you today, Mike.
I appreciate that. I want to actually add something to it.
Please.
When you do that, come out into the outdoors, sit around a fire and try it.
Okay.
It's actually where a lot of my practice kind of refined itself was in stages. Started out, shooting, and then realizing I need a safe place where nobody's going to make fun of me or give me a problem for what I'm doing. So then I brought it into the outdoors onto trails and spent a lot of time, I guess, forest bathing as they call it. And then I started exploring indigenous cultures and practices and built the meditative fire ritual. And I'll tell you, when you slow things down and then you nurture something, it is some of the most intense internal feelings that you're going to experience.
Mm. What's the difference now? What's the difference now for the practice versus in the beginning? What's the experience like now versus what was it like in the beginning?
Well, now I would say it's filled with a lot more intention. There's a lot less obstacles around what I'm doing to get in the mood. Now it's, I get up and I ritually do these things instead of just kind of whenever I feel like it. So, for example, if I'm getting up and I'm going to build a meditative fire and keep a fire for the day, there's first steps of going out, getting the sticks, and actually paying attention to what you're picking up, being present. And then you come back and you break everything down, you get it ready. And then there's the art and the act of taking the fire starter and actually starting to get the flame and start raising it and building it up before ultimately you get the fire. And then you just sit there and you reflect. So it's been a lot more of an in-depth, reflective process as I've honed things and made it a lot more personal for sure.
Mm. Is there more resistance or less than in the beginning, or
There's
same?
that there's definitely a lot less.
Yeah.
And I feel like the resistance has kind of been teased out based off of just practice.
Yeah. And you just do it now. Now it's natural. It's more of a natural occurrence.
Yeah, now it's just kind of routine. It's Monday, so I'm gonna do this and this way, or even with example Monday being opening day. There's a ritual. You get up at 4 in the morning, you get yourself all ready, packed up, you head out to the hunting spot. And like I said, I've made a lot of things simpler and more ritual based. So you lay down a little bit of tobacco in preparation for the day, and then you head out to your spot. You sit, you get ready, and you just kind of enjoy the day and let it unfold.
So interesting. This is going to be probably the most interesting podcast I've ever been a part of. I knew it was going to be too when I saw it on my calendar and I did research. So this is going to be interesting. I dig this. I dig this,
So
Mike.
I appreciate that.
Of
I
course.
want to. You're the guest, though. I want to dig a little
I
bit
don't care. I
into.
could care less. This is a conversation around a campfire, my friend. There are no guests. Everybody's a guest.
I want to dig into some of your rituals and how they've kind of impacted the transition in your life.
Man, one of the rituals that keeps me grounded is fitness. There's something about the transition between when you walk into the locker room, you put your headphones on, you put your hood on, you find the right song, you hit play, and when you walk out onto the gym floor, there is a transition that happens mentally that I don't know if I could convey in words. It is just you're a different person. And there is nothing else. It's just the mission of the next 90 minutes is to really create something from what seems like nothing. We're going to create something. There's something about that is just so grounding to me. And it's extremely humbling. The weight doesn't care. It doesn't care to make you feel better. It doesn't care if you're having a bad day. It doesn't matter. It's just you against you. And there's something about that is very ritualistic for me. So that's something very interesting. And other than that, I'm a fairly habitual creature. I essentially do the same things every day. So I get up at the same time. I go to sleep at the same time. I do my mobility. I do my learning. I track my weight. I track my calories. I do all that stuff because I've lived fairly unintentionally in the past. And as blissful as it felt, it also brought me to some places that I never want to go to. So now everything is kind of weighed out of, okay, there's only so much time in the day. I'm going to invest some here, some here, some here. But I'm a certainty-driven creature. So I like to know what's going on and when it's going on. If we had this conversation 7 years ago, I wouldn't have any of that. Yes, fitness, but I didn't have habits. I didn't track habits. I didn't know what to read. I didn't know what to listen to. So that process has shaped my life in every way.
I think that's actually like the most common thread between everything is finding that intention.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you find that intention, you start to build a little bit of confidence around it. So you can start to control your life a little bit more.
Yeah. I think that's the best way to build confidence is to state you're going to do something, to prove to yourself that you're capable of doing it. And then this is a big one, self-assigning the fact that you did it. Humans are really good at self-assigning negativity. Like, I screwed that up. I made a mistake. I didn't do enough. This. They just lack. But if you say you're going to do something and then you do it, you should get credit for that. And I think, for me at least, that has helped me tremendously. When I say I'm going to wake up and my alarm goes off and I wake up, cool, we're starting off on a positive, we're building momentum. But if I'm hitting snooze over and over again, I'm already letting myself down. And then I feel worse for the rest of the day. Should that attach to my self-esteem? I don't know, right? I guess that's a philosophical thing too. But when I'm doing better, I feel better. I don't think that's a coincidence.
No, that's the most basic root answer to that kind of philosophical question. Where does self-esteem really start? How do we build that? And it's with those simple little rituals like we keep talking about.
Hmm.
If you get up in the morning, you're already winning the morning. If you get up with practice, with intention, because we all have the routine set in the morning. We go brush our teeth, we get our coffee and this and that. But if you start to remove some of those distractions, like maybe don't turn on the TV or don't start doom scrolling or anything like that before you've achieved 1, 2, and 3, brushing your teeth, getting your coffee, and then making 3, I sit down and I meditate or I write in a journal for a few minutes and just reflect. That starts to build that self-esteem, which also brings you closer to becoming a better friend to yourself.
Friend to yourself. I love that. And it doesn't have to be big. I love that example of that's a 10-minute practice, maybe. Right? It depends on how long you're brushing your teeth. Depends on how long it takes you to journal. I one of the things that I think we've kind of lost sight of when it comes to self-improvement is oftentimes it's the least sexy thing that works the best. But a lot of people want to talk about taking massive action, and this is how you turn your life around today. You turn your life around today by stopping going in the negative direction. That's it. That's how you turn your life around. You start by stopping, and then you slowly turn it around. It's not about life changing habits. I think it's about a habit that can shift your day a little bit. Then, when you do it long enough, over and over and over and over again, when I'm on podcasts, oftentimes people say, all right, what advice would you give to somebody? Create one new habit under health, one new habit under wealth, and one new habit under love. And when I say one new habit, maybe it's you try to get 8 hours of sleep instead of 6. Cool. Let's start there. Great. That doesn't mean you have to track your calories, drink enough water, exercise every day, this. Nope. Let's start with one. Under wealth, maybe it's learn for 30 minutes a day. Eventually, that's going to translate to becoming a more valuable, quote unquote, in terms of financially human. And then under love, meditate 5 minutes to start. Play the gratitude game with your partner if you have a partner. If you do that for long enough, you're going to start to see shifts. And then to your point, as you become more capable, it's like this, weighing myself every day, that's easy. Let me up the ante. All right, what else can I do for health? What else can I do for wealth? What else can I do for love? That's how I started with 3 habits 5 years ago. And it was just, okay, this is easy. It's sustainable. When it becomes sustainable, we can add a little bit more. We can add a little bit more. But it's never been one thing that I did that made the massive the difference. It was one thing I did for long enough that made a difference eventually. And I just think, but that's not sexy. It's not super sexy to say, well, just do it for a year and see what happens, Mike. Probably be in a better place a year from today.
Well, to go back to yesterday, being opening day, the most unsexy thing about deer hunting is sitting there looking through a set of binoculars. Everybody thinks it's all about the harvest. Well, how do you get there?
Yeah.
Yesterday I went out into a new area that in fact, I think I've only walked around there maybe once before yesterday. And it was a lot of time just sitting on the dike, just glassing. And granted, I didn't see anything, but it was getting to know the environment. So next time that I go out there, it's going to be a little bit more familiar. I found a few key spots that I want to check out and go explore with boots on the ground and get in there and walk around. But none of that comes without the unsexiness of sitting there staring through binoculars and sitting with yourself all day. And I feel like this season is going to be a mission to fill these tags, and that's cool. That's the kind of thing that I like, because even if I would have seen a deer yesterday, being the first time I've hunted there, it would have got a pass anyway, because I've got to have a connection and a story with what I'm hunting. So it just builds and builds and builds, and now the power is within me to go out and actually do these things a little bit more informed.
Mm.
And that's where I feel like starting out in the morning with these simple routines and being mindful and present sets you up, because you're putting the power of positivity and the power of momentum within your own hands.
You read my mind. Momentum. It's a very hard thing to explain, but when you have it, you know it. You can feel it. It's just, yeah, it's very hard to explain. I feel like when you start doing stuff that you don't really want to do, but you should, you just feel, life just feels easier. It just feels a little bit easier, because a lot of the hard stuff that's supposed to be hard, you're doing, which makes everything else a little bit easier. But I think it's kind of like fulfillment. I don't know how to explain fulfillment. It's feeling. So describing a feeling is relatively hard. I think it's the same with momentum. When you know, you can feel it. I have a ton of momentum right now in business and life, in fitness. Can you see it? Probably not, because most of it's behind the scenes. It's the unsexy stuff. But I think that's what creates the momentum, to your point.
So as we come toward the end of our time, though, I want to have you talk to somebody who is sitting there with no momentum on the edge of their bed, ready to give up.
Mm.
How do they start capturing that momentum and get themselves back up on their feet?
I would say start almost embarrassingly small. You don't have to turn it around today. It's not, that's not what it is. That's one thing. And anytime I'm talking about mental health, I always tell this story because this, I don't know if there's a better story for perspective than this. We were lucky enough one time to interview somebody named Kevin Hines. And Kevin Hines is in a very rare group of humans where he jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge with the intention of taking his life, and he survived. And he said something that I'll never forget. He said, the second my foot left the railing, I regretted it. The second I realized that I could not reach back and grab the railing and I was going to fall, however many feet it is, I regretted it deeply. And that is a perspective that most people will never be able to explain. I always share that anytime I'm talking about mental health because I've been there. Mike, you've been there. We've both been there in our own unique way. I think we would have regretted it. And there are people that care about you. You are worthy and you are valuable and your future has a lot of bright spots. It's just up to us to get there. I would say all of that. And then I would say reach out to somebody that you feel safe with. Because that's the best advice I can give because that's what I did and that helped me. And I got some really good advice from that person and that gave me a new perspective and that gave me hope and that gave me opportunity and here I am however many years later getting to do what I love every day. So I would take all of that and I would wrap it up with a bow of your adversity could be your advantage. And who knows what you're going through right now might end up being the thing that you dedicate your life to helping other people avoid. And if you want to talk about fulfillment, purpose, and passion, I can't imagine a more purposeful, fulfilling life than that.
I gotta agree with that. Looking back where I'm at now, looking back to then, I would have regretted it. And I think that, when we find ourselves in that position, it's difficult because we've lost the ability in that moment to compute,
Mm.
to cope, and to process whatever it is that we're going through. We just want the pain to stop. And if we can find a way just to bridge ourselves to the next moment, it it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Well said, brother. Well said.
I agree. I appreciate your openness and your vulnerability in the way that you share things. And speaking of which, you got to let people know how they can get in touch with you, find out what you got going on, all that good stuff.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. You're wonderful. I'm grateful. I appreciate a brother in the mission, all the love. I appreciate you. Our podcast is called Next Level University. Just search all the podcast platforms. We're on YouTube, all of that happy jazz. My handle on Instagram is Never Quit Kid. If I can be of service, questions, comments, concerns, you need a shoulder, whatever it is, send me a message. I do my own DMs, so I will always be a message away, and I genuinely want to help if I can. So those are kind of the two best places to follow up with me.
Beautiful. Kevin, this has been great. Thanks, man.
I appreciate you, man. Likewise, it's been a very enjoyable experience for me.
I look forward to reconnecting down the road.
Likewise, 100%.
I don't believe in goodbyes, though. So until we meet in this life or the next, I wish you a safe and prosperous journey, my friend.
I appreciate that. Right back to you, my friend.